Let me teach you a simple way to do improv. This is the block that I've already made. I chose Brave New World as my book rather than Catcher in the Rye. I liked the color of the copy that I had of Brave New World, and it reminded me of Patchwork. So I thought this would make an ideal cover. However, in doing the research, I also found this cover that I really liked, which kind of showed a dystopian city with all of these towers. Then I chose my color palette. When you're choosing your color palette, you don't focus on, oh, I have to have all the same colors that are in this cover. I decided, oh, maybe I'll find a purple in my stash. I didn't buy anything. Maybe I could find a nice teal. And actually I found this shot cotton, which is a little thinner fabric, but it does have like an iridescence to it. And that's because when the fabric is woven, the warp or the lengthwise threads are a different color than the weft or the crosswise threads. And then it creates this iridescence. And I think it looks good in the block. And then I had some small pieces of this rust color. You don't have to have big pieces of fabric to do improv. Oh, and by the way, improv stands for improvisational piecing. And I decided on this gold, and then I had this grunge fabric. Grunge is great because the front has the different colors, the different grunge effect, but the back has just the solid color. So when you're purchasing this from Moda, you are actually getting 2 for the price of 1. And then I didn't quite have the right yellow, but it doesn't matter. Don't focus on the exact colors. Just use what you have in your stash. This is my finished block. I'll show this to you ahead of time. These are the improvisational stripes that I'm going to show you how to complete. And I decided to quilt this ahead of time because I think improv really requires some free motion quilting. I did matchstick quilting on the stripes, and then I did some box in a box free motion quilting. It sort of resembles the tower in this picture, and then on this cross member here I did sort of round or oval, and again I thought it sort of resembled some of the design from this cover. I'll show you the back. Now normally I wouldn't quilt the block ahead of time. I'd quilt it as part of the quilt, but I really wanted you to see how improv looks after it's quilted. For improvisational stripes, we're using a technique called mat made strips or mat made stripes. So you need a rotary cutter, but you will not use a ruler. And this is going to be hard for some people because you're so used to making everything straight and everything even, but you have to get away from that thinking when you're doing improv. So let me just demonstrate. So these 2 strips I've already cut. I'm just using a scrap. I'm just going to cut gracefully up. I'm using the mat. I'm gracefully cutting up a line, but I'm not focusing on that line. So in my head, I'm imagining a line that goes up this piece of fabric. And then just start below the edge of the fabric. Make sure you have a nice sharp blade in your rotary cutter, and then cut. And you will get really good at this. Maybe just take a piece of scrap fabric that you don't care about and just practice cutting lines until you feel that you can cut a nice straight line. We'll do the shot cotton next. I'll first straighten this edge a little. There we go. And again, Don't worry if it's not completely straight. That's the whole idea of improvisational piecing. And you can do different widths. Try not to have jagged edges. If your rotary cutter didn't cut like I just did up here, try to make a nice smooth cut. And it's okay if it's a little curvy. It's okay. I'll show you how to stitch that so that it actually looks really good in your piece. I'll show you how to press the strips. I really recommend that you press these seams open. And I recommend that you press as you stitch. This is just experience talking. I haven't really read this in a book or seen anybody else do this method, but I really like to take my time. This is slow stitching, slow pressing. And if I press it open, I've got a nice wave in that strip, which will add a nice effect to your improv. Here's the back side. I've already pressed a few strips. It's very simple. You just use your left hand to open up the seam, then press. I like to use a little homemade spray starch. You can get some over the counter called Best Press if you don't make your own. And that really works well to keep this piece that you're making nice and smooth, nice and flat. So you can see it's not straight. I have a lot of edge over here and a lot of edge here, but we're going to work on that. We're going to cut that. And there's a nice pressed piece. So I've sewn the strip sets together and you can see it's not even. So I'm going to take the rotary cutter and I'm going to just improvisationally cut these edges straight. And again, I'm just imagining a line, kind of looking at my mat. And now I have a piece that's sort of straight. I want to show you how this piece isn't quite long enough. So my block is approximately 9.5 inches by 7.5 inches. But you can see that this isn't quite that long. But I still want to use it, so I'm going to cut it in half, approximately. And then I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to stitch these two like that together. And then I will have a strip that's long enough. And while I'm at it, I'm going to cut this into 3 strips. And again, I am not measuring. I don't have a ruler. I'm just cutting what I think is a straight line. And now I have 4 strips ready to be put in my block between my yellow strips. I'm showing how to stitch the yellow band to the striped piece. And I like to have the striped piece on the top because then I can monitor how these seams lay flat. If I had it the other way around, I could accidentally get one of these seams folded like that, and you don't really want that to happen if you can help it. If it happens, so be it, but let's try not to let it happen. Whoops, it just happened. I'm not going to fret over it. And then here's where I do break my rule. I do press these seams toward the yellow band. If you tried to press all of this open with all of these seams, it would just be a little wonky and it would be pretty bulky. It still makes a nice flat piece. So I've sewn all of my strips to my bands, my yellow bands, and I'm happy with the way it came out. It's larger than the size that I intended, 7.5 by 9.5. And I do have to straighten the edges, so I'll quickly do that with my rotary cutter here. But this is improv. So I'm just gonna cut a diagonal line and I'm gonna add this strip. So all my stitching is now getting cut. And look at that. So I'm going to the machine now, and I'm going to add this piece in the center. I stitched the green diagonal strip, and now I'm happy with my block. It's not the same as this one, but it's the right size. And do I need to add these strips? Let me square up, and then I'll decide from there. When I square up the block, I try to find places on the mat that 12-inch guide here. I'm going to cut straight with a ruler, and then I'll come over here and I'll do it again at 20.5. So my block is 7.5 inches wide. So I just lay the ruler down on the line, and with the ruler I do a nice straight cut. So this is the only time in improv that I am using the ruler. And that's just because if I'm going to put this in a quilt, I want it to be the right size. And I'm going to do the same for the top and the bottom pieces, but I'm turning it sideways. So it might not be long enough. I want it to be 9.5. Oh, I think it'll be long enough. So I'm going to cut on the 12-inch line here. And, oh, it's not quite long enough. So that means I will have to add a strip on the bottom. Well, let me explain what I did with this block. So when I finally squared this block up, it wasn't 7.5 inches. So that is why I added these black strips here. And then the width, or it wasn't 9.5 inches, and then the width wasn't 7.5 inches. So that's why I added a band over here too. But I think it looks nice. It adds to the effect of the block. I don't need to do it in here on this one. I think I'll be safe if I just cut this right here. And now my block is done. So I hope you have success with yours, and let me know how it goes. I want to see what you've done.